And so we go on KTLO. KTLO? KT? Is it Katie? KTLO? Katie, hello. No, it's KTLO, keeping the learning on. And this, we number these episodes for the reason that one follows another, and therefore, never mind. This is episode 38. 38. When we started, we said, I wonder if there'll be a 2. And now here we are at episode 38, and I'm just going to open the gates and let the lingering throngs who are in the waiting room in. We have some more guests with us today. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And episode 38 is about transformation versus transaction. That whole thing that one ends in a ation and the other one ends in an action. I think that's it. Episode's over. So there we go. And here are the core 4. 4 core? 4 core and 7, never mind. Patty Blackstaff in Alberta, and Greg Sanker in Oregon, and Simone Jomour in France. Is that the official French greeting, Simone? When you waggle your ears like that, I don't
know. It's the camera's not switching over as you introduce us, so we're doing stupid things, and you're just nuts.
That's nice. That's really cool.
It's really for your benefit, Roy.
Team entertainment.
Yeah.
It is home entertainment. And also we have moi in South Carolina. And I kind of kick us off every week. And then we have an interviewer du jour. And the interviewer du jour. Do I have to say it that way? No, I can just say the interviewer du jour.
Please.
And it is Simone. Oh, wait a minute. See, this is how I think. Simone Jomour, interviewer du jour. Oh, we have a little poetry this morning. It's just amazing how that works. Okay. And if you want to get a hold of any of those folks, this is how to do it on Twitter. And we have a website at KTLO Learn. There's some information about what this is because nobody understands it, not even us. And so today, to talk about transaction and transformation and those things, we're going to depend on Simone. And over to you, Simone.
Bonjour, mes amis. We are here live again. Oh my goodness, can you believe it? And it is towards the end of the year. Is everyone thankful for that?
We don't know yet because
I can see lots of nodding heads though.
Simone, I was going to use the phrase of 2020. I was on mute. Sorry about that. How many times did you hear that this year? Oh, I'm sorry. I was on mute. You guys see me?
And there are others that just said, sorry, we've been muted.
Yeah.
So anyway, so here we are again, and we've got some really cool guests too. So we will, during our guest interlude, try and see what we can gather out of their wisdom of what's occurred for them this year, that's for sure. Anyway, so understanding transformation, my goodness. How many years and gurus and voyages have people taken to try and understand transformation? For me, it's somewhat like asking someone, build me a sandcastle. And that image that you now have in your head, because I just asked you to build me a sandcastle, is not necessarily the same image that is in my head. There's certainly an amount of tension that comes from talking about transformation, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. If we use that tension in a right way, we can create breakthroughs and moments of growth. But transformation somewhat feels a little nebulous, and for some of us, nefarious. Yeah, exactly. And Greg, you get the first question based on that. Well, transformation.
Is it because I laughed while you were talking? Is that why?
Yeah, and I just love to pick on you. But transformation seems to have been a bit of a buzzword, more now in the last few months than ever. So what's your take? I mean, really, is it a real thing, or is this just a bunch of hype?
Oh, so I didn't realize it had become a buzzword. I didn't notice that by being in the industry. Liar. No, transformation is a very real thing. And it's organizations have been doing what they've been doing for a very, very long time. And transformation is a little bit more than just trying to keep up. And we've been transforming. There's a lot of organizations that are doing legitimate transformation, legitimate, hard, depthy kind of work with or without the term transformation. So that's the good news, and that's a good thing. But the bad news is, in my opinion, is that a lot of organizations are out there buying products and saying, hey, we're digitally transforming, we're adopting whatever. I won't name a specific technology, but we're in a lot of cases, we're confusing purchasing of new technology, especially if you can throw in buzzwords like AI and machine learning and big data or whatever the phrase that pays. It's like, that is not transformation. And I hope we get a chance to dig a little deeper about what it really actually is. But I think there's legitimacy to it. It's not just a buzzword, but I think it's become a buzzword and it's been overused and used in the wrong context.
And there's certainly a lot of different contexts in which transformation can be used. Lots of different industries talk about it in different ways. So, Roy, what kind of example can you give me of transformation that's not digital transformation?
I'm going to transfer my hand into a bunny. No, that's a different show. Example I use sometimes in presentations and so forth is the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers had a bicycle shop in Dayton, Ohio. And in 1903, they produced the first working heavier than air airplane and flew it. So how did they go from having a bicycle business to producing something that the world had never seen before? That's a pretty interesting transformation, which is different from an incremental change, right? It's not an incremental change from building a bicycle to building an airplane. It's a totally different thing. And that's the key with transformation. It's not doing the same thing with a different technology. It's doing something substantially different with technology underneath it. Of course, the Wright brothers had to understand technology, as they did in the bicycle business. They understood gears and pulleys and levers and power and all that good stuff, and had done a great deal of engineering study on how to turn an airplane. They used a technique called wing warping, which turned out to be not really good in the long haul. But they changed fundamentally what they were doing. And that's what businesses miss a lot, is they're not examining fundamentally what they're doing. How are they delivering their product? What product are they delivering? Is there a digital way they could do this if they want to do digital transformation? It's not just doing the same exact processes and using different tools. That's the key.
Yeah, it's a really quite curious thing, because although I do like the sound of wing warping, that where that might go could be incredible.
Yeah, wing actually, there were, as you know, because we've all flown a lot, I think, ailerons go up and down and cause the plane to bank and turn and so forth. They didn't have the benefit of developing ailerons, separate parts that would do that. So what they did was they exerted pressure on the wings so that the wings would bend, producing the same effect. So that worked in the materials that they were working with, but later on, when the materials changed, nobody was able to do wing warping, and it proved to be a short-lived technology.
Yeah, but it's really interesting though, because how often have human beings tried to transform who we are and what we do and how we live by taking what we see in nature and creating a simulacrum of it of some kind and doing that. So as you were talking about, I was thinking, well, yeah, are we doing new things, or are we doing things in new ways? That's a different kettle of fish. So, Patty, you've done quite a lot of work with companies, over the last 15 years, helping them through this change and transformation. Tell us a little bit more about the transformation and transaction.
Okay, so Transformation and transaction. I'm actually not going to get technical here. What I'm going to do is tell a little story about two girls. So there's two girls. One is named Acton. The other one is named Forma. Acton goes into a hair salon, right? She buys a really cool new product because she's going to completely transform her look. And she goes in and she buys this product and she reshapes her hair and she's so excited about it. The other girl, Forma, she's nervous and scared, but she's committed. She has 26-inch long hair and she gets 21 inches cut off. She buys the same product and she looks totally different. But the next morning, Acton comes out of the shower and she still has the same hair. Forma, on the other hand, comes out of the shower. And even if she doesn't apply the product, even if she doesn't use it at all, she has completely transformed her look. She no longer needs to use a blow dryer. She no longer needs, so that's the difference, right? Forma turned around and said, I'm truly going to transform. Acta said, I'm going to look different and I'm going to give it the appearance of transforming, which is basically the easiest way that I can put together the difference between the two.
See, that it's a really cool story. I'm thinking back to my marketing days. One is a glamour, isn't it? One is just a glamour.
Yeah, we're talking the difference. We're talking the difference between cosmetic and actual transformation, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's the same thing. Even when we go to look to whether it's to change what's going on in our house. I mean, we did the same thing here in France when we were looking at what kind of place do we want to live in. You have to make the difference between what's structural and what is cosmetic. And there's a huge difference between that. We ended up taking out a whole wall and putting in new floors. So although the floors might have been cosmetic, by removing the wall, we actually changed the structural view of what we were seeing and how that then worked with some of the cosmetic changes. So I think that's actually really quite curious. Are we dealing with the glamour or are we dealing with the inner structure? That's kind of cool. I like that. So Roy, what do you then see as the significant differences between transaction and transformation?
Well, as I talked a little bit about with the Wright brothers, it's not just doing the same thing using a different tool. That's where a lot of organizations really miss the boat in terms of talking about digital transformation. They say, oh, we've optimized our processes. Now we just do the same thing, but instead of making a phone call from point A to point B to hand off a task or send an email, we're going to use this tool and collaborate and do it. But that's not the point. The point is rethinking everything about how you do and how you deliver and finding better ways to do that using the technologies available, right? It's not just the same thing. It's certainly not optimization. And there's a lot of thought right now around optimizing processes and how that can actually be wind up being negative, because you can produce areas of constraint, and a theory of constraint comes in and you wind up actually backing things up rather than making things go faster, better, cheaper. So think about what you do. Think about it in this new world. What's a better way to get this product to the consumer? And what about the product itself? Is there a different way you can deliver this thing? I mean, I was involved in banking in the days when to open a checking account, you walked into the door of the branch, sat down at a desk, and I was on the other side of the desk and filled out a bunch of forms, and you signed the papers, and we opened an account, and a few weeks later you'd get checks in the mail, right? That doesn't happen that way anymore. It's a completely different thing. It's a different product, it's a different service, and delivered using different technology. So that's key.
Okay, all right. Now, I'm just thinking about optimizing this. I don't think there's nothing wrong with wanting to improve, right? There is nothing wanting, to get a little bit faster, cheaper. There are the benefits that come along with that. So any of those improvements, hey, that's great. But in terms of thinking about transformation. Can we have both the glamour and the structure? It would be really cool if we could have both of those things, not because it makes it, you know, really good to do that. So Patty, you often mention systems thinking and transformation. Why is that important? And do you think that could offer to us that combination?
Okay, well, that's like a 3-hour talk.
No, we don't have that much time, but you know, highlights would be good.
So bear with me. So if I'm going to distill it down into 3 distinct areas. One is a little bit about the taxonomy of systems and organizational intelligence, then maturity, and then the intelligent enterprise. So I'm going to kind of talk about those in 3 areas. So organizational intelligence, there are 2 kinds. You have natural and artificial intelligence that all kind of comes together in an organization. That's broken into how it filters up. So there's individuals, and you have individual intelligence. Then there's the collective. That's all those individuals interrelated. And then there's emergent, where you combine that with knowledge and data and other things in industry. So it's the sum of data, information, knowledge, wisdom, and then there's maturity. So organizations have about 3 stages of maturity, and most of them never make it to the 3rd stage. They start as an information organization. That's your social media, that's your startup, they're actually not looking at the system. They're looking outward at what we're building, the app, the growing the customers, but they haven't even figured out a monetization model. They haven't, and then they grow up a little bit and they turn into a learning organization. This is where a lot of people get stuck. They get stuck. I mean, Agile's been around for 21 years almost, come this January, and learning organizations are just now starting to say, hey, maybe we should be a little agile. And then there's the intelligent enterprise. These folks are evolved, right? And there's fewer of them. We don't see a lot of them. They don't get hung up on the frameworks. They utilize them in order to accomplish the business purpose. They care about continuous improvement. They understand circular economy. They're looking at ensuring that all of that is supported internally and externally. The tech is kind of a business integrated function, as opposed to IT sits over here and then operations here, and then so they've evolved, right? The intelligent enterprise is actually the vision the vendor sells you. When they're looking at saying, hey, you can truly transform with this tool, they give you this beautiful picture of this intelligent enterprise, something you can become if you buy this thing. And then, they don't realize all that's going to be involved, like the individual, collective, and emergent intelligence, that has to be kind of gathered together, how they need to have this distributed system of data, information and knowledge, wisdom, protection of the data. They look at figuring out the purpose and benefit of the business, society, the environment where they fit. They're regenerative by design. And there's this amazing vision in front of them. And then they add a tool, right? So when you talk about systems thinking, if you're actually going to transform, we need to think, and I said this in our last one, we need to think about the constituent parts, how they interrelate, how the various systems have worked over time, what the impact is going to be. We need to analyze the context of the larger system for all of those other impacts, and then be able to, and here's the ticker, be able to predict what will happen after the transformation.
Wow, that okay, who's got their crystal ball?
No,
that's, I know. There
is some predictive analysis there, though. You have to really be able to take a look at who you are, who you want to become, and you've got to do the predictive analysis. There's a lot of analytical pieces that get missed. And that's why it becomes transactional, right?
Exactly. And I think we've mentioned this, I've mentioned this a couple of times on other calls too, you know, our relationship to risk. What is our relationship to understanding all that's available to us to make those decisions and where we're going to end up with that? So as my grandfather used to say, only bet what you can afford to lose. But in so doing, do we actually limit ourselves? So there's a question to be asked when we do that. So Roy, why do you think, especially based on what Patty has said around that, why do we think people and organizations actually mistake transaction for transformation?
Transformation is hard. That's reason number one. Organizations don't like to work hard. They really don't. And part of the key to getting organizations to understand what they have to do is convincing them that it's going to be worth the effort, right? Transactions are fairly easy to measure. There's quantitative data you can gather pretty easily about transactions. Transformations are a little bit unpredictable, right? As Patty said, you have to try to predict it, and that's true. And there's a couple of ways you can do that, and if we have time later on, I'll talk about those. But it's much harder to measure a transformational initiative. I was very careful not to say project. I was very careful not to use that word because a project has an end date and transformations don't. So you have to think about it in terms of what the ultimate benefits are going to be. You have to carefully plan so that you will come out of this with more revenue. You'll come out of it with more efficiency. You'll come out of it with bigger market share, whatever your goal is for this transformation. Just try to think through it. And it's a lot of work.
Oh, do I really have to go through all of that? What happened to just the, you know, the wiggle of the nose, the wave of the magic wand? Where's my fairy godmother when I need her? You know,
well,
that type
she
of
works.
thing.
She works for the sales team.
Yeah, exactly. I just want I want some credit for staying muted while Patty was going into that territory there, because that is I have a lot of energy around this. Organizations are just our penchant to do the same thing only different is very high, and we struggle with that so much. And it's like there's part of me that says, you know, transformation is just code word for, hey, we didn't keep up and we need to fast forward a bit here. But it's more than that, right? Because we're at a point of time where basically everything that we've done up to a relatively recent point, and if you squint your eyes and go with me here a little bit, but most of what we've done is we've replaced or automated manual practices or manual processes using technology. That's mostly what we've done up to this point in history, right? But there's a fundamental shift in now we need to do, as Roy was saying, we need to consider the bigger picture, the deeper issues and the cultural elements, because it's not just replacing with more effective or more efficient ways to do that or optimizing. And I know it's Roy carefully said optimizing process. Because it's a little bit more, but many of you know I work for the state of Oregon, and I had the opportunity to have a meeting in the Department of Motor Vehicles building, and while we're meeting, and I kid you not, and this was in the last 10 years, an employee was pushing a cart, and it had a stack of paper about a foot high, 12 inches high, and I said, "What is that?" And they said, "Oh, that's vehicle titles." And this gal here has been doing that for the last 35 years. Literally, that's been her job as she pushes them from point A to point B. And then I watched the organization who then used technology, PDFs and email and all that, and they optimized that process. And they used the term that they had transformed how they're delivering vehicle titles. And I didn't say it out loud, and hopefully they don't tune in and be offended. But here's the thing. That's not transformation. Transformation would be adopting a digital registry of vehicles. So there are no vehicle titles, and that digital registry would instantaneously be interactive with other states or other law enforcement or other people that are stakeholders or key stakeholders in understanding vehicle titles, et cetera, et cetera. That would be transformation, and that's possible. So just putting new technology to do the same thing is really it's not what it is. I doesn't seem like we can do an episode without me mentioning Simon Sinek, and I'm not that big of a fan. But the enormity of saying start with why becomes real obvious when you're heading into a digital transformation. Is why do we exist? What is it that we're here to do? Because so much of what we do in organizations is just keep doing the same thing, only a little bit better than we used to do before. Businesses are existing. The opportunity for business to deliver services that didn't exist just a few short years ago is where it's at. And organizations that are just sitting on their laurels thinking, well, let's just, let's get 20% more efficiency out of operations. They're really missing the opportunity. And we could use lots of digital transformation fail stories, et cetera, but that's not the point. It's like, if you're not seeing possibilities that technology opens up to you, then you're really just optimizing and doing the same old thing. And you're really imperiling your organization if you do that.
Wow. That is like,
I have a lot to say about this because it's kind of a big deal. And now, like last week, Akshay told me that I was wrong. And so I can't wait to go over to Daniel and say, hey, Daniel, open mic.
Well, this is a cool thing because welcome, Daniel Burston. You have not been on KTLO before, and I'm so happy that you're here. You and I've known
I'm a listener. I'm a listener and a learner. I'm not part of this.
Oh, you are so in this. I've just put you in it.
I'm picking on you, Daniel. I'm trying to get you to come off of mute.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things that Greg said was, hey, isn't just transformation for code, we didn't keep up. What do you think about that?
I was here when we moved from, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. I was here when we introduced virtual into data centers. And I went to my CIO and I said, we're going to virtualize our data centers. And he said, sure. So for every 10 servers that you virtualize, that means you can get rid of one of your computer operators. And I went, well, who's going to create the code to do the virtualization? Well, the other 9. And I went, okay, and those other 9 are supposed to do what as far as keeping the lights on and everything else that they do and handle all the requests and stuff. But there won't be as many because now you virtualized everything, so you won't have as many incidents. And it was just this, yeah, like Greg is doing. It's just this, like, find the squirrel, put him onto a wheel and watch him go around real quick.
And do we have enough nuts to feed the squirrel? That was always my question.
The exact same argument is going on now with cloud and digital transformation.
That's exactly
okay?
right.
If we go digital, we can fire half the business. I mean, you look at these small banks that do da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and they've got, 4 employees in a closet. I'm going, yes, they don't do foreign transactions. They don't do mortgages. They don't do all the stuff that you expect from a big bank. They take your money, put it into a account that's not fully regulated by your country, and you go, how cool is that? Fantastic.
I really
yes,
believe
ma'am.
that we do. We say we can make this more efficient, more seamless, and often what's heard is cost efficiency when we're actually talking about efficacy. Right?
And I raise my hand. I'm the ops and DevOps. Okay, this is not a secret. I am the ops and DevOps. And every time somebody goes no ops to me, there's just like this, I turn green and I bulk up, and it's not a pretty picture.
So there's a moment in history here. I'm going to pass my baton of IT operations to Daniel, and he can take up from here.
Well, see,
I'm sorry, you're who again?
I love it. Daniel is part of a core that I know very, very well indeed. And we do call them our grommets, our grumpy old men in IT. And I have to say that they are some of the best. Wow, they call it what it is. There is no time to, should I say, fuff around. It's like, let's get to the core of what something is. I'm going to check and just see.
But I have a question. Has this transformation, transaction, strategy, discussion completely, and I don't know who to send this to, but people smarter than me, hopefully, on this call, which is everybody. Has COVID-19 redesigned this transformation strategy discussion? Because whatever you were doing in January and February is toast now.
Yeah, well, I'm going to hand
Patty?
that one over to Miss Patty. Absolutely.
So the thing that has happened that I think is both frightening and beautiful is COVID and the pandemic and the situation around it has ripped open the underbelly of everything that was wrong, right? Everything that wasn't working, and that's anything from the technology side straight through to how one leads. Really great leaders became better leaders. Really crappy leaders became even worse leaders because they just didn't know how to handle it, right? And we did the same thing for IT. We literally had to take a look at, holy cow, none of our policies match up with being able to accomplish this. We have to rewrite our stories. We have to redo. So yes. And I think that we created an awareness at a level where an awareness was where there was a wall we couldn't get past to have those conversations. And now we have to, because to do business, they have to now understand what it looks like, right?
Okay, so now there's a phrase you use that given NJ and I have a couple of similarities in our background, I really want to use this phrase because I was giving a talk about empathy the other day, and people get confused about what that really means and how that I guess applies to transformation versus transaction. But NJ, Patty just used a phrase there, ripped open the underbelly. I mean, what have you seen that how this has changed transformation versus transaction?
Okay, so I'm gonna due to some of the sensitive natures of my job, I have to be careful when I say, but what we realized is there's some things that we thought we had to be in the office to do for the sake of, well, a lot of our customers, for the sake of the business they're in, that they realized they didn't really need to be in the office. And they were still effective in carrying out their jobs and everything. And from a support side, there's some things we identify like, hey, we've been doing this all the time and we don't really need, it's not really that important. And I kind of talked about it last week in KTLO, like talking about organizational change. There's going to be some things when we move back that, for one, there's to be some things that we don't do anymore that we don't really need to do, but our customers are expecting it. How do we walk them through that process? But also, how do we adapt to this new environment where we learn we could really get a lot of work done, still be effective, and not be in the office for 40 hours a week or 50 hours a week? And so even I talked to my boss the other day, we were talking about this thing. He's kind of like, hey, I don't think I need people here 40 hours a week. We're looking at, and this is the military government's perspective. So it's really, you really need to be there. But he's like, I'm looking at, do what you need to do, while you're here, and then go home. Because we're willing that we're just there for the sake of being there, just filling the, checking the hours, but we're not effective. And so that's some of the things we're seeing on this side.
Yeah, I really agree with that. That thing about having, should I create another phrase like adaptive experience of our employees, as well as the experience our customers are now having in a new way of working? So what I want to do is I want to check in with Kathy and Dee on this from that team's perspective around, okay, so we've already said we're actually at home trying to work. We're not in an equal situation across the board. The way in which we've transformed, how is that different to we need to operate? We have transactions that we do. We have our activities in our role that we need to do versus how has that truly transformed us as teams?
Oh no, Dee just said Kathy. I want to go back and tag on to what NJ was saying. When we think about what we needed to do to become, 100% work from home, support has been doing that for a long time. If most support organizations run a 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, it doesn't matter. Now, government regulations, will just leave that on the table for now because that is a little bit different. But the one thing, when we made that shift, and I don't want to call it a transformation, but we made that shift, is we didn't necessarily, good leaders rise up and they have that awareness and they start looking at the challenges of their employees, and the bad ones just don't even see it, to be honest. But things that are missing somewhat from support is the true ability to hang around that cubicle, which I use the analogy, the cubicle becomes a war room. You got a big issue going on, and you even get developers are coming over in QA and everyone is just working as that team. That's not the same online. We've tried a lot of things, we've implemented a lot of things. We can collaborate because we have been collaborating virtually on a day-to-day basis, but not to the extent that we have had to this last year. And so I think, I'm going to go back to NJ, awareness. We have to work with our people to figure out what they need for them to be successful. And if they're successful, the customers will realize all the benefits that they are still wanting to enjoy from the system.
So, Kathy, I'm going to ask a question as a follow-up to anybody on this, but you mentioned, and I was in support many moons ago myself, and we did work remotely. I was full-time work from home back in the early 90s, doing support. But one of the things I wonder is, to what degree is there being a clear end game or a clear goal of a support situation? It's broke, needs to be fixed, that facilitates a time, space, distance, being in the same airspace just doesn't matter because we're here to do a job. We're getting this thing done. Whereas a lot happens in an office among knowledge workers at the coffee pot, or just noticing somebody or something, or having an offhand conversation that may not be as facilitated in a virtual situation. So how much of it is, yes, we've tried that, we've proven that we can do that this year and IT for a lot longer, but the concern that we haven't yet addressed, and I think there is a way to address it, is that spontaneity, that ingenuity that comes organically within an organization. I think that's part of the cultural change that leaders need to be focusing on, not how do we get back to doing the same old thing because I'm afraid we're not going to be competitive anymore. It's like, how do we compete in this context right now?
Yeah,
Right.
there's a lot of stuff around that, I think. It was funny, Kathy, you wrote something earlier, and I really love this. NJ brought up awareness, but there's also, all we have to do is change one letter, and we've got awness. What puts us in awe?
I like awness.
I love awness. So, Dee, a quick word from you around you know, this as again, it, you know, just the transaction of doing our day-to-day tasks, etc., versus what is that true transformation around allness?
I've written a bunch of notes and really thought about the difference between transaction and transformation. And in my mind, the transaction supports and drives the transformation. It is the machine, the nuts and bolts, the visible, what you can see, the actual action that you see between people. And I've been thinking about 3 examples. One is the caterpillar turning into a butterfly. I'm sure you've all heard that one. One I'm thinking of is going back to the bank, the transaction of putting money in the bank or opening a checking account, but the transformation that you're wanting is to see your money grow. And then the third one I'm thinking of is cooking, where you take certain raw ingredients and you match them together in a transaction and you put them together and then you cook them, you bake them, and then you transform these things into something completely different. And I'm imagining that, I'm assuming that we're saying that when we're talking about transformation, we're talking about it being a positive thing, moving from something that was to something different in a positive way. But there are transformations, of course, that are the opposite. We've seen people transform from one thing to another thing. In terms of the working from home, I'm thinking that until there is one of the big words for me is commitment and trust, not so much for the butterfly, but for the ingredients that go in the pot, and the bank, there's a high level of commitment and trust. You say, put your money in there and you're in there for the long haul. You don't put it in, take it out, same with the stock market. You don't do that. You ride the waves and you transform your money like this. So it's an improvement, but in order for there to be a transformation around the working from home, my belief is that until there's like I hate to say an end point, but there's a point where we have to say, okay, we are going to transform into working from home. And then there's a baking period where we examine that, because right now, my personal feeling, and maybe the feeling of a lot of people out there, is they're not committing to it because it's not permanent. They're not looking at it that way. They're looking at it as, how can I get by working from home? But they're not truly saying, okay, we're working from home from now. This is what we're going to look like. And yes, those personal interactions, those are wonderful. We're seeing in education, we're seeing in meetings that you don't build relationships and trust like this. Yeah. You build them in person, but you never know when those magical, it's intermittent reinforcement, because you don't know when or how often those magical water cooler moments are going to come, but they do come. So,
well, I know that Patty has seen some of those moments. She has been able to find the signs. Look, I just did air quotes, Greg, and you didn't pick me up on it.
Really? I did air quotes.
No,
yeah,
I have one hand, so I can only do one air quote.
I do it on purpose, and he
I saw you. I just wanted you to celebrate that I stayed on mute and left you alone.
Oh my God. Okay. So air quotes, Greg. Yeah. So Patty, what are some of the signs it's really time for companies to actually transform? What are, some key observations that you've made?
So I'm going to get to that, but I'm also going to jump on the work from home thing, because I want to impress upon something that I think is incredibly important and I'm not hearing in the conversation. This is not ones and zeros. It's not either work from home or not work from home. We're asking the wrong questions. The questions we need to start asking, if we're actually going to align with business purpose, is how are we working? What is that going to look like? Not, do we work from home? Do we not work from home? There is a bigger, broader, what is going to be functionally good for the purpose of our business to get us where we want to go in the best way possible. So
Can I jump on that, Patty? Because I was noticing the same thing. It's like, it's not just can employees work from home? That's one thing.
Yeah.
But what constraints no longer exist when we recognize that employees can be fully engaged and functional in a location other than the physical location of the organization? Can we tap into broader, deeper talent pools? Can we use more contingent workers for emergent teaming, and just rethink how work gets done and what our relationship between organizations are? Go ahead.
Right. And what new constraints have
Right.
emerged, right? I mean, that's we have to be looking at it differently. We have to see the business, the purpose of the business, what we're doing, and then align this other stuff. If all we're doing is sitting in that do we work from home or don't work from home conversation, we're missing the mark, right? Now, okay, so you asked me a question, Simone. How do I know when it's time for a company to transform? The biggest goal of most executive leaders is that the company runs as a well-oiled machine. And that is one of the biggest signs that you're in trouble. Because when you get there, you've stopped innovating, you've stopped paying attention to trends, you've stopped paying attention to disruptors. You have, you're playing the rim game where you're sitting on your laurels and you think everything's going to be great because you made it to the top, right? Another one is old effective tricks and laws. They're no longer working because by doing them, it's becoming counterproductive. You're seeing things go in decline and you don't know why, right? And then the industry is struggling. So that's the bigger picture. If the whole industry is struggling and you're still trying to do this messy soup of holding on, it might be time to look at a transformation. When a strategic inflection point hits you, such as COVID, right? That all of a sudden it hits us. And then there's this gap between when we begin to decline and when we're still hanging on. And it's in that gap that the Band-Aids are no longer going to suffice, right? There's too many, too often, it's too much. And then you're working harder to go backwards. This is when you're dropped into, we talked about it in one of our other episodes where we talked about the sunk cost fallacy, where we double down and work hard. Well, this isn't working, so let's all just double down and work harder. Those are the signs. Every time you see those 5 signs happening, you know it's time for the business to transform.
Yeah, for sure. Look, there's so much really cool stuff here. What I want to do is I want to just do a really quick free flow, I guess. Is there such a thing as a quick free flow? I'm not sure that could be a deluge. Is that just a,
There is, but not with this group.
Yeah, I was going to say that's more like the chaos. I live for chaos.
I see you, Daniel.
I love it. Daniel, give me a quick phrase, word, or feeling around this transformation versus transaction. What do you want people to know or leave with?
The biggest thing I've seen in London is that there's all kinds of people trying to do something. I'm not going to use the T word. And they keep forgetting that somewhere in their organization, there's this thing called an employee. And there's
and
no
do you know
what's
that
in
managers are employees too?
Or you will, yeah, pick, anybody. But, there's no what's in it for me. There's a lot of what's in it for something, but there's no what's in it for me. And if there's no what's in it for me, why should I behave?
I actually like it when you misbehave. More gets done. It's more productive. It's amazing. I want to think about that thought. Hey, NJ, what's your thought around that? How can misbehavior actually be a benefit for us?
Oh my God, that's a tough question.
Simone, why did you ask somebody from the HDI?
No, I mean, that's a good question. So no more from a disruptive perspective. Kind of like, so I think about the book, First Break All the Rules by the Gallup book, so you need someone who's going to kind of challenge the status quo and kind of go in the opposite direction, if you will. So if I kind of talk about the misbehaving in that context, of really of breaking those rules and staying outside the norms. So when you're seeing that, hopefully management at whatever level is identifying that, you're challenging the status quo, and there might be something there that we need to investigate too. Because to really Patty's excellent point about when the time you're running like a real oil machine is when you're starting to fail, because you don't see the need for improvement. So.
Well, Kathy, what's your quick takeaway on this one?
I'm going to go back to what we talked about last week, which is removing the fear of change. And change goes with transformation. And, we cannot afford to get stuck, rest on our laurels, whatever you want to call it, sit in that comfort zone. Or we've said it over and over. We'll fall behind. We'll fall behind. And we've got to listen to the employees. Deep down, they're the ones sometimes that want to be a disruptor, but are afraid of being a disruptor, but can really sense what's going on, particularly with customers.
Yeah, for sure. And, one of the things that as I've been delving more deeply into the humanizing IT side of stuff, one of the things that's really come up, and I did mention it last week, but I'm going to say it again, because one of the things that we need in order to transform is adversarial collaboration. So I do love the resilience, and I love the fact that dissent is one of the things that needs to happen, but it needs to happen in a collaborative way. So Dee, this is definitely down your area where we should I say dissent with heart.
Yes, I believe that work culture, again, going back to what Kathy said, it does require brave people, and that requires a culture of safety and trust. And if misbehaving is identified and defined as basically breaking a rule, then look at why that rule was broken. Maybe it was out of necessity, and that rule is not working for you. That goes back to, I think I've mentioned before, try not to make a culture where your rules are so cemented that you can't work within them, because you have to have the ability to apply intelligence and compassion and adapt to change. And sometimes you can't do that if your rules are so stringent. And I love that book. It's like my Bible, First Break All the Rules. That people hate to see that on the HR director's shelf, but I love that book. I love that book.
Well, actually, one of my favorite, can I use the word deviants? Yeah. One of my favorite people that actually deviate from change is Greg Sanker. And
did I just call it deviant?
One of my favorite deviants is Greg Sanker.
That's going out on Twitter later.
Oh man, I love it. So what is it you want to leave people with today about that feeling and that understanding of deviating to create transformation versus just transaction?
Well, with boy, I'm going to misquote this. Roy or Daniel maybe can fill me in. But if there's no deviation from the standard distribution, the statistical model, then there is no change. In other words, if everything happens safely inside, the bell curve, then nothing ever changes. And therefore, deviation from the status quo is required for any kind of change, whether that's building an airplane, not that we've ever heard of such a thing before, or delivering online streaming services. These are things that didn't exist before. And we can't solve new problems using the same old. Yes, the fundamentals are the same: people, collaboration, innovation, the sciences, the engineering, but the problems are very, very different, and they require a new perspective. And so we've got to change our perspective. Roy said right at the top of the hour, and this is what I'm going to leave you with. He said right at the top of the hour is we've got to do things different if we expect to produce different results. We've got to move away from what things were.
Well, we don't need same, but different, do we?
That's right.
Okay, so if we're truly going to transform, we have to transform, and I said it earlier, system-wide, right? We have people. So we need intellectual diversity, psychological safety, and something to rally toward that is meaningful and beneficial. The environment. So having a strategic, intelligent enterprise with data, information, knowledge, and wisdom in a distributed model that is building a regenerative cycle, right? Culture, moving through our cultural biases, our closed-mindedness, and that's a long haul, but that's how transformation occurs. If we don't move past our cultural biases and closed-mindedness about whatever it is we're trying to transform, we're never going to move forward. And then closing the gap, right, resulting from data or communication breakdown. And so that's part of the culture as well. And then leadership. And I kind of, am a little hard on leadership, but a lot of the times, if leadership's paradigms and worldviews are not shifting to move with the transformation, you're not in an intelligent enterprise mindset. The financial support has to be around the growth. Efficiency is about efficacy, long-term vision, and they have to admit and readjust fluidly through the inevitable leadership mistakes. And transformation, that is a big one. That is, wow, this wasn't the greatest decision. Let's fluidly move through it, right? And so it's people, environment, culture, and leadership. You have to look at all of it.
Oh, you just used one of my favorite words, fluid. It's been one of those things where, as our world changes, we as people also change, right? We do continue to adapt and build our resilience as we practice and go through stuff, and we come out the other side of it, and we are not the same, because we've just added to our experience box inside our head that, we've got this, memory cache, and we might not always remember the details of what that was, but we always remember how it felt. And that is absolutely critical. It goes to all the things that have been occurring for people that we sort of expect them to just magically take this stuff on board. And yet we're not addressing the really key things around, this transformation takes our assistance to help them through mental health. Now, our mental health is not, this is about our ability of both feeling and thinking. It's that combination and providing the approaches and the techniques. So a true transformation and building our resilience muscle, if you like. Building our resilience muscle so that as we get to the next thing, whether it's a small wave or a big wave, we're going to move through that. So I've got a final question for Roy. Why do you think understanding transformation is one of the keys to the future?
Because the future is going to be different, quite simply. We're looking at a time when technology is allowing so much and is producing so much and is changing so rapidly that as we look ahead, the jobs that are going to exist in 10 years don't exist now. The techniques that are going to exist in 10 years don't exist now. The computing that is going to exist in 10 years doesn't exist now. We're looking at a time of, quantum computing, augmented reality, virtual reality, that is totally going to change the way we look at the world and the way that we interact with the world. It's going to be very, very different. And so we need to understand the concepts of transformation and some of the ways that we can guide it and be part of it and push it in a positive direction, because things are also at a point when, the Skynet is a possibility. We can have automation take over things, and it's really important to do that. So I'm going to finish up this today with a couple of thoughts that popped out of the conversation today. Great conversation, lots of folks, great, super, excellent. Kathy talked about used the word shift, and we've been talking about transformation. So here's a way to think about transformation. The shift was to working from home. The transformation is what happened in our lives because we're now working from home, and the way that businesses had to react to the fact that people are working from home, rethinking all the processes and the structures and everything had to change because of that, or should have changed. Maybe in a lot of cases it didn't. And another thing that came up today was simply that, are people, do they feel in control of something? Do businesses feel in control? And if they do, they're in trouble. Patty, that was you, I think, right? And I thought immediately of one of my personal heroes. Of course, I'm a gearhead, and I would go to motor racing as a Mario Andretti, who said, if everything seems under control, you're going too slow. Right? And that's the way you look at it. You've got to be skidding around the turns a little bit. You've got to be drifting. And if you're not doing that, if everything is under control, you're just not going fast enough. So we need to be able to skid, but be able to predict how far we're going to slide. That's the art of being a race driver. We know how far that car is going to move sideways. I got really expert at knowing. I drove a car with really bad rear axle hop. And when that puppy went off the ground, I knew exactly how far left or right it was going to come down because I knew how that car reacted. We need to be able to predict things. So pay attention to your friendly local futurists, first of all, and think about how things are pointed now. Things don't change direction very easily. So when you look ahead, tend to look in a straight line, but look as far through the curve as you possibly can. That produces much better outcomes. All right. Great conversation today. Well, this could go on all day long, but by then, maybe our task is to put people to sleep. Okay. That's the thing. People are having trouble sleeping during the pandemic. We're here to help you with that, folks. Yeah. Great conversation. Thank you so much, everybody.
Brilliant.
And so we'll be back next week, special edition next week. Oh, coming up to the Christmas time. So we're going to have a special edition next week, and we'll be here.
We expecting Santa Claus to drop in?
Well, I thought he was already here, but that's
Daniel.
Daniel
Oh,
Claus.
such a tease.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. What a great conversation. Wow.
Brilliant.
For
Mwah.
stopping into KTLO, keeping the learning on.
On.
Whatever way we're pointing, that's where we'll land. Okay. See you next